Hi everyone, welcome to Javaras. My name is Himanshu, and in this video we are going to create a project. The requirements of the projects are hosted on roadmap.sh website. I will provide the link in the description. The project is related to the notes, but this time the notes will be written in Markdown language, and then we need to render the notes in HTML. So this is the project Markdown Note Taking app. Now we need to build a note-taking app that uses Markdown for formatting. We need to build a simple note-taking app that lets user upload Markdown files, check the grammar, save the note and render it in HTML. So if I show you the example of Markdown, let me say Markdown, and you can read it from here. So there is nothing more to read about Markdown. Very simple language. For example, you can see here. This is a sample markdown. Here, let me zoom it in. Here we have hash, and after that the heading. So this is rendered as like h1 in HTML. So in the HTML, h1 means the biggest heading, and this is one. If you need to create an h2 element, then you just use double hash here, and then you can see headers. So again, you can like this is h1 h2 and this is h6, and similarly you can create italic text using star at the beginning and at the end, and you can create italic using underscore as well. In order to do create bold, you can use double star or double underscore, and you can combine them as well. So this has most of the, or not most, like many of the features of the HTML, which are generally used if you need to create documentation for your code base, or if you need to create notes, you need to take notes, then you can use Markdown. And most of the editors uh, today supports rendering Markdown. So you write Markdown in your editor, and at the same time you can see the preview of your Markdown as well. So this is a good thing to know to in order to take notes, so that you can put headings, links and these things. For example, this is a link, sorry, this is an image, and this is a link. So the link text will be in square bracket, and in this parenthesis this will be the URL. Okay, so enough of that. Now let's look at the features which we need to implement. Okay, so first of all, we need to provide an endpoint to check the grammar of the note. Early on, I did not understand what do you mean by checking the grammar of the note. There can be two things. First is check the grammar of the Markdown or syntax of Markdown. For example, when you code, let's say in Java or any other language, then the syntax of the language is checked whenever you need to run or compile the code, and that is called grammar as well. So each language has their grammar defined, and another is it can like this can be talking about grammar of the note or grammar of the actual note which you write. For example, grammar of the English language or grammar of the Hindi language, like this. uh, but I'm not going to implement this in this video, because first of all, if you take notes, you generally don't focus on grammar, and and we will build the rest of the project. If you want to implement grammar by yourself, you can do that. We need to provide an endpoint to save the note that can be passed in as Markdown text. So we will provide one endpoint where user can upload the Markdown file. We need to provide an endpoint to list the saved notes. So we will display list of notes which are uploaded, and return the HTML version of the Markdown note. Okay, so for let's say we will have some ID. So user will provide us the ID of the note, and then we will render the note in the HTML. That means we will convert the markdown into HTML and we will return that HTML to the user. Now, if uh, if user access that endpoint in a browser, then browser can automatically uh, figure out that this is HTML and then it can render the HTML in appropriate way in the browser. So we will build this project in Spring Boot Java. This is our application and this is a blank application. We don't have anything. Now let me walk you through the architecture of our program. It's a very simple architecture. So this represents the user or client or your browser, and this is our nodes controller, which will be responsible to accept the request and send back the response. And there will be one node service which will implement all the business logic of our nodes application. Now in order to save the nodes, we will have one storage service. So storage service will have the responsibility to store the nodes. Now it depends on the implementation of the storage service. How do you want to store the nodes? In this video, we will store the nodes in our file system only. So we will have one implementation which stores the given content in the file system. Then we have nodes repository. So this stores the information of the nodes, let's say nodes title and information of where the node is stored in the storage service. So object ID or file URL kind of thing. And in this video, we will use memory or we will use hash map to store our nodes, and ideally you can use database to store your nodes information. Then we will have one converter which will convert markdown into HTML. This will be an interface, and we will use one external library which will provide us with the implementation of this interface. We will create some adapter around that, but the basic idea is that. So let's create these classes. First of all, I will create a new web controller. Web.node_controller. Now this will be a REST controller. And let me say request mapping API nodes. Now this will have some methods, but before that let's create some classes to represent our nodes. So I will create a new package and I will call it core. So this is where our core business logic will reside in. Here I will create a new class called node. So this will present our one node. Now I will make it record, and the node will have few attributes. The first is it will have ID, which will be UUID. Then it will have the title, so string title. This will be the title of the node. Then another information which we need is where the file of this node is stored, and that is generally called object ID in storage service. So, and that is generally string, and let's call it object ID. Then we will have new Java class. This will be interface and it will be storage service. So this will be an interface. Now the first method in the interface we want to have is store the content in a file. So and return one object ID back. So it will return a string, and I will just say store. It will take one input stream. Let's call it content. Let's just keep this method for now. So going ahead, we will create other methods based on the needs. Then another interface which we need is node repository. This is an interface. Now in the repository, what methods could we have? We have first of all, we have a method to save the note. So let's do that. And whenever you save something, then you get back one ID. So we will get back the whole note. Then note, I will say save, and we will provide one note. We will save it and it will provide another note. So this note can be same as the given note, or this can contain some additional fields like let's ID. Then another is we need to list all the notes. So I will say collection note and get all. This will return all the notes. Another is we need to get one single note. So note get note using ID. So this will be UUID. Okay, so this is our note repository. Another one which we will have is, let me create a new interface, and I will say Markdown to HTML converter. So this will have one method, void convert. So this will take two things, input stream and output stream, and whatever content is in input stream will be in Markdown, and it needs to populate the output stream with the content like HTML content. So convert input stream, let's just call Markdown, and output stream HTML. So it will read content from output stream, will convert that into HTML, and we'll put that in the output stream. So that's what we are planning to do. Okay, now let's implement those. So first of all, for storage service, I will just store the note in the file system. We need one implementation of a storage service. So for that, I took the reference from here. So you can go to file upload in file upload in Spring, and you go to this URL. So here you can see how you can upload files in Spring and how you can store those files. So we will do the same. And let's create new package here. I will call it file system, because our implementation of storage service is implemented using file system, and I will create a new Java class here, and let's call it files storage service, and this implements storage service, and we need to implement the methods. So we need to store one method, and we need to return object ID. Now how do you want to return object ID? So what we can do is we can create new random UUID. We will do that. Private string generate ID, and let's return UUID dot random UUID dot toString. So this will be our object ID, and let me say string object ID equal to generate ID. So this is our object ID. Now we need to create a file. Now what we will do is we will create a file with this name object ID, and we will put the content whatever we are getting into that file. Now we will create one directory where we will put all these files, and that we will call root location. So let's do that. Private final path root location, and we can add constructor parameter, but instead of path, let me say string root path, and from root path we need to create root location. So paths dot get root path. So this is our root location, and we can even do this dot to absolute path. So this will be our root location, and we will store everything related to this root location. For example, root location can be nodes. In that case, you will create another file inside nodes directory, and will put all the content from this input stream in that file. Now we have this object ID, and from object ID we need to create the file's location. So private path, and we need to say get file location using file path. So we have this file path, and we need to return the file's location. So we can do this dot root location dot resolve. That means it will resolve the given path related to this root location, and we have this file path. So this will be our file location. Now here we need to check whether this root location is actually parent of file location or not, because what may happen is this file path can contain dot dot. In that case, the file location will be parent of root location, but we want root location to be parent of file location, so that no one can create file in other directory. The files should always be created in the root location. So let's do that. If I will say not file location dot get parent dot equals root location, in that case we will throw some error. And so in this project I will just throw runtime exception wherever I need to throw error, but actually you can create another dedicated error for your storage service, and throw that error. But here I will just throw runtime exception because we don't have that much of time. So new runtime exception, and we can say that cannot create file at file path. Now we know that in our case this won't be the case because the file path is created here, but we will create another method which will retrieve the file. In that case, the path of the file will come from some other service, and we can never trust that. So that's why we are doing this check. Otherwise we'll just return file location. Okay, so that is it. Resolve, and after resolving I will say to absolute path as well. We have resolved it now. So this logic you can look at here. So here you should be able to see that, for example, here file system storage service. So I took the reference from here only. So this is store, and here we create destination file, this dot root location dot resolve, and then we normalize it. So let me normalize it. And then we check whether its parent is equal to root location or not. Now we have already done this to absolute path in the constructor, so we don't need to do it. Okay, and then we can return this file location. Now here let me call this method get file location with object ID. So this is file location, and now we need to store the content of input stream into this file location. For that we have one method in the files class, files dot copy. So it takes one input stream, so which we can say content, and it takes the target will be file location, and it has copy options. So copy option dot, okay, no, I forgot the option. You can say the copy option is standard copy option dot replace existing, we are just copying it and we will get some error. So I will just surround with try catch, and we will throw a new runtime exception, and the pose will be this exception, and we need to return the object ID. So that is our store method. Now after store, now let's create implementation of storage service as well. Sorry, a node repository. Let me create new Java class, and this will be in memory. So in memory node service, and this implements, sorry, this will be in memory node in memory node repository. This implements node repository. So I will implement these methods. Rename the file. We need to implement three methods. Let's create one map to store all the nodes. Private final map, and its ID will be UUID, and the value type will be node, and it will be nodes. And let's initialize it in constructor. Nodes will be new concurrent hash map, because there can be multiple threads at the same time accessing the same map. So we need to we need to use thread safe implementation of map, which is concurrent hash map. Now in order to save the node, so we will assume that this node won't have any ID. We need to generate the ID. For that I will create a new method here. I will say private UUID, new UUID, and it will return UUID dot random UUID. So let's generate new UUID, and I will call it UUID. Now we will check whether this UUID already present in the map or not. So while this dot nodes dot contains key UUID, in that case we will generate another UUID, and now here we will say this dot nodes. Okay, now the node does not have any ID, but we need to save the node which has the ID. So what we can do is, in the node we can create a method to return a new node with the ID. So let's do that. Public node with ID, and UUID new ID, return new node and new ID, title, and object ID. So that is it, and we'll go here, and this dot nodes dot put, and here we will put UUID, and its value will be node dot with ID UUID, and I will just return this dot nodes dot get UUID. So we will return this node back from the map. Now in order to get all the nodes, we can just say this return this dot notes dot values and get note if we want to get one note. So let's do that. I will say if not this dot notes dot contains key. In this case, the note is not present in the repository, so we'll throw error. Now here as well, I will just throw runtime exception. Not found plus ID. Otherwise, we will return this dot notes dot get ID. So this is our in-memory note repository. Now we need one implementation of Markdown to HTML, but let me just create a new package here. I will call it memory, and I will put this in-memory node repository inside. Now we need one implementation of this one, what it is called, a Markdown to HTML converter. For now, we will keep this implementation to not do anything. Okay, and that is because first of all we want to just check whether our uploading of the files and retrieving the files, listing the files is working or not. Now here I will create a new node service. Okay, node service. Now this node service will need all these three things: private final node repository, private final storage service, and a private final to HTML converter. And I will just add constructor parameter for all these three fields. Now the first use case will be to store a node. Now from the UI we will get is title of the node and the input stream of the node. Create that method. Public save node. We will have title public void save node. We have the title of the node and input stream the node, or I will just say content, and we need to save the node. So how can we save the node? First of all, we need to create the file, or first of all we need to save this content of the node. Then we will get back one object ID, and that object ID we will put in the node, and then we will save the node using node repository. So let's do that. First of all, this dot storage service dot store content, and this will be object ID. Now we will create a new node, and the ID will be null, title will be title, object ID will be object ID, and this is node, and this will return the node, not the void. And here we will say this dot storage or node repository dot save the node, and we will return this one. So our node has been saved. Now after saving the node, another method which we will need is, okay, for now let's just implement this one only. Let's go to controller, the way we have node controller. Here I will create one mapping to upload the node. I will say post mapping and public node, and let's just say save node. Then we will have one request param and title, string title, and it will be, is called multipart, it will be request param. So this request param is the name which we use to send the request or attribute name. In the form as well, there is some name attribute in input tag. So that corresponds to this request param file. Its type will be multi-part file, and let's just call it file here. Now we have the file, but we actually need the input stream. So what we can do is file dot get input stream, and if we see the documentation, returns an input stream to read the content of the file from, and the user is responsible for closing the returned stream. So that means it's a good idea to use try with resource. So try, and I will say input stream content will be file dot get input stream. Now inside try we will do everything, and we need to catch one error, which is IO exception. Now whenever we will get IO exception, I will just throw new runtime exception and with E. Now the content, now we have the input stream, we have the title, so we can use node service, private final node service, and let's add constructor parameter. And here this dot node service dot save node, we will just ask title and content, and we'll return whatever we get by. Okay, now I have saved it. So if you look at the root location, so that root location should be present at the root of the project. So here I will create a new directory, and let's call it nodes upload. So we will use this name for root path. Now we can go ahead and run this project, but we will get error in startup because we need to we need to pass in this implementation of node service and other things as well. So for that I will create a new project config. Inside config package, so this is responsible to create the required beans and configuration. So let's create a bean. The first bean which we will create will be of storage service. So storage service, and I will return a new files storage service. This needs the root path, so, and I will specify nodes upload. That's a nodes uploads, something like that. I'll just name it nodes. Okay, another bean which we need is node repository. And let's return new in memory node repository, and we don't need to pass anything here. Let's create a bean of type markdown to HTML converter. And I will return new markdown to HTML converter, and we will implement this convert method. So let's do that. We'll say HTML dot write. We need to write bytes. I will get bytes from markdown dot read. Unended exception method signature surround with try catch. I will return a runtime exception if there is any exception. So what we are doing is we are reading from the input stream and we are putting that in the output stream. So we are not doing any conversion here. And so this doesn't matter right now, but we will get error at startup if we don't provide an implementation of this. Now again we need to create a bean of type one, what is called node service, and let's just return new node service. We need three things. So we can accept these three things here, and these beans will be injected in these parameters, or we can directly call these methods as well. But I like to accept these beans as argument. We will have storage service, then node repository, then Markdown to HTML converter, and let's create this one. So storage, then repo, and then converter. I guess the order of these are correct. Repo and storage. Okay, now I think we should start the application. Okay, so our application is running, and let's try to upload something. I will go here, I will create a new tab. We are inside roadmap backend projects. We are not inside the Markdown notes. Here we have this Markdown notes steps MD file. I will just upload that one using curl. So curl localhost 8080 API notes, and then have first is title, and title will be let's call it steps, and then file Markdown notes steps.md. Let's send this one. Okay, so we are getting this one. We are getting back the ID of the note, then title, and then the object ID. Now there should be one file with this object ID created, and if we go here, then the notes upload. Okay, we can see one file. We look file. You can see this is the same file. So this is working. We are able to upload the note. Now let's list all the notes. So listing of the notes would be pretty easy. That's thing unfamiliar about that. So we will have just one get mapping public. This will be list of notes. I will say collection of note and list notes, and I will just say return this dot node service dot get all nodes. Let's create this here. Create method get all nodes in service. Here I will return this dot node repository dot get all. Refresh it. We again need to upload the node if we want to see that in the list, because our node repository is in memory node repository. I will upload it again, and now this time I will just do this curl localhost 8080 API nodes, and you can see we are getting a list of nodes. Let's upload another node. I will do this. Another is there is one readme.md file as well, so I will upload that readme file. And sorry about that, and file will be readme.md. This has been uploaded. Now if I ask for the list of nodes, we are getting two nodes: title readme file, this is object id, and another is title steps and object id. So we are getting these things. Now the another is the last endpoint which we need is to render the nodes. Let's do that. I will go to node service, or let's go to node control, and here I will create a get mapping. And here we will have id, so this will be id of the node, and render. I will have one suffix called render. So if you have this render suffix, that means we will render it to HTML. Public, I would say void and render node. Now here what I would like to do is, see, we can access the request and response here. So let's do that. First of all, path variable and id, uuid, id, and then here the second thing which I want to accept is the HTTP servlet response. Now since we are rendering it, so the content type should be HTML. Let's do that. Response dot set content type, and it will be HTTP content or content type, text HTML. Let's just do this, text HTML. This is the content type of the response. Now we will get the output stream from the response, and we'll send that to the node service, so the node service can put the content in that output stream. So let's go to node service, and here public void render node. It will get one output stream, and let's just call it output, which you need to fill in. Now we have this output stream. Now here we need the actual file which we have stored. So we need the content of the markdown file as well. For that I will go to storage service and create one method here. Now this method will return input stream and retrieve, and it will take one object id, string object id, and we need some documentation as well here. Since we will return one input stream, that means we will create one input stream in retrieve method, but we will not close it. So if you, whenever you create any stream or any resource which is closable, but you are not closing it, and there are some limitations or there are some situations why you are not closing it, so you need to clearly mention in the documentation that the user or whoever called your function is responsible to close that stream. So we will do just that. So I will say read the object or file specified by object id returns an input stream. So we can say user is responsible to close the stream, and this in bold. object ID. So we can say ID returned by store method while saving the object or file. Then it returns an input stream of the content stored in the file specified using object ID. Now I don't know how like this Java doc is returned, but I just wrote whatever seems fit. So if someone looks at the documentation, then they can see read the object specified object ID and returns an input stream. User is responsible to close the stream. Okay, so now it is the responsibility of the caller of your method to close the input stream. Now we have one related problem because we did not implement it here. Let's implement this method. Okay. So now you need to retrieve the file using this object ID. So we have the object ID and we can get the location or file location. So get file location using object ID and file location. Now from the file location we can read the file. So if you remember here we did something file copy. So we can do the file copy again. So let me just do that files dot copy. Now in this case, so the source will be path, location, and the destination will be one output stream. So instead of doing copy, we can read the file. So there is this new input stream which will read the file and create a new input stream. So we need to give file location and we just return this. And so we need to add some try catch here. So here I am just throwing a runtime exception, but ideally you should create one exception, let's say storage service exception, and throw that exception explicitly so that whoever calls your method should handle that exception. But here we are just returning runtime exception. Now here it will create this input stream, but it is not closing it here because that is the responsibility of the caller. Okay. Now that being said, let's go to node service. So here we are getting output stream, and we will get one input stream as well. First of all, we need to find the node from the node repository. So this dot repository dot get node using ID. Let me create here UUID ID. Using ID we will get a node and I will store it in a variable. Now generally you should check here as well whether the node actually exists in the repository or not, and but for the time being we are just assuming that it will work. So now we have a node, and now we can say this dot storage service dot retrieve, and we need to provide our object ID node dot object ID. Now this is I will say markdown, and let's call it HTML. Now we have markdown, we have written, but you see here input stream used by try with resource, input stream used without try with resource statement. So we can surround with try with resource block. Now we have this inside try with resource. So now it will be closed automatically, and if you look at the documentation of retrieve as well, it also says that user is responsible to close the stream. So we need to close this stream, and we are doing that here. So we are fine here. And but this can throw exceptions. and I don't want to throw this exception. I will just want to add, again I did this. You can do that, but that's close. So we are throwing runtime exception. Now we have two things. We have input stream of the markdown and we have output stream of the HTML. Now we can say this dot converter dot convert from markdown to HTML. Now it is the responsibility of the converter to convert it however that converter wants. Right now we have the implementation of the converter which does nothing. It just copies from markdown to HTML, and that is fine for now. If I go to node controller, here I need here first I will access the output stream from this response. I will say response dot get output stream, and let me call it HTML. You see here again we have unhandled exception. Download the document. The documentation will tell us more, and it says that the servlet container does not encode the binary data. Calling flush on the servlet output stream commits the response. Either this method or getWriter may be called to write the body, not both. So we will just first of all I will surround it in try catch, try, and action catch. Here I will do this dot not service dot render node via id and output is HTML. Save it and let me restart it. Now let's upload one node. So I will upload this readme.md here, and now this time we can get the list as well. And in the list, why do we see 3 nodes? Okay, yeah, we did not restart the server. We rerun this document. Now let's upload it. Get the list of nodes. Now localhost 8080 API nodes, and then the node ID is this one, and then render. So this time we are only getting this hash. Okay, and that is because there is some error in our this in our implementation of this convert. If we just read, so I think this read 1 byte only reads the next byte of data from the input stream. So this will just read 1 byte of the data. That's why we are only seeing one character there. But we can do something else here. I will say, let's say while true, markdown dot read, replace this occurrence into red. What does it return? This method, okay, the value byte is returned as int in the range 0 to 55. If no byte is available because the end of the stream has been reached, the value is -1 returned. So we will say if read is equal to -1, in that case break, otherwise HTML dot write read. Whatever we read, we will put that in the HTML, and this is upload, and this is to read, but the ID is different. And you can see we have the content of this readme file here. Now we need to actually implement this converter. So if I go here, then there are many implementation which we can use if you want to use, if you want to convert markdown to HTML, or if you want to render the markdown. So there is one implementation called Flexmark Java, which we are going to use. And if you want to read the documentation of Flexmark Java, so in this GitHub repository it is mentioned that its documentation is similar to commonmark Java. So we can read the documentation here, the commonmark Java page. And if you want to use it, we can use Flexmark Java from this Maven repository. So this is the documentation. You can go through the documentation, and you can go through the same examples given here as well. I also took the reference from these examples on. And the documentation is pretty simple. So there are 2 or 3 steps. First of all, you have markdown file. So you need to create one abstract syntax tree, or AST, or document, or node. So you can call it anything from that markdown, and then from that node you render it using some renderer. So now you can render it in multiple things. So now there is this renderer called HTML renderer, which will take that AST or that node and will render that in HTML. That means it will put HTML tags wherever required for that node or document. So we will just do that. Now the great thing about Flexmark is, so if you go here, then you will see that there is not only one this Maven repository for this one. There are a lot. So if you read here, there are a lot of extensions which you can use. For example, read this Markdown does not support all the features of HTML. For example, it doesn't support tables natively, I guess. In that case, you can utilize the extensions. So it is also pretty easy. You go here, you can see there are a lot of these repositories. So these are different extensions which you can use. This is Flexmark all, Flexmark Java core, and all extension modules and converters, which if you want to use, but that will be heavy. So in our use case, we only want to cover the core parts of the markdown. So we can just use core of Flexmark Java, implementation of commonmark for parsing markdown and rendering to HTML. I will just use this one. I will go here, pick this one. Since we are using Gradle, I will click on Gradle. Format is Kotlin, and so this has been copied, and I will put that in here. I will put it after this one, and here I will just put one comment, self managed, and I will rebuild the project. So now we have this implementation. Let me create a new Java class. I have created Flexmark package. Now inside Flexmark, let me create Flexmark HTML, sorry, markdown to HTML, and this will implement markdown to HTML converter. I will implement the methods. Yes, good. Now here we need to create two things. The first is, I mentioned two steps. So the first both steps needs one object. If I go to this documentation and well, now see there are two things: the parser and the renderer. So parser will take your markdown and will create a document or node, and then renderer will take your node, and based on the implementation of the renderer, it will render your node into, let's say, HTML. So we need to create these two things, and these two things like this parser and renderer are thread safe, so we can create instance variables for them. So I'll say private final, and it is called parser, and it should come from this Flexmark. Parser and private final renderer, HTML renderer, HTML renderer, I will call it renderer, and I will this add constructor parameter, but I don't want to accept them as constructor parameter. I will accept something called this one, for example, something called options. I will just show you that options is kind of configuration which you can use. This dot parser equal to parser dot builder, and in the builder you can provide options. So, and the type is data holder configuration dot build, and this dot renderer will be renderer dot builder with configuration dot build. So the same configuration can be used to build parser and renderer. Then I will create another method. So if you don't want to pass any configuration, you want to use default, in that case public flexmark to HTML, and I will call that constructor defined at line number 15 using data holder dot we'll look at implementation of data holder, dataset, table dataset. You can use mutable dataset and mutable dataset, new mutable dataset. So we are not providing any configuration. That means it will use the default configuration. So in these configurations, you can specify extensions as well. So for example, if I go here, then you can see that there were some examples. Okay, so for example, you create options, and then in the options you can specify this extension. So you can specify the extensions, and you can specify the options for HTML renderer as well. That's that. Now we have the parser and renderer. Okay, let's say this dot parser dot parse reader. So either we can parse an string. So if you parse a string, in that case you need to read everything from input stream and then store that in your memory and then pass that to this function. But that is not memory efficient. Instead, we just want to use input stream and then create a reader and then use parse reader. So it will parse it in chunks. It will not create the string in the memory at once. So let's do that. I will say try here this dot sorry, not this, new input stream reader markdown, where I'll say reader, and then we have the reader. Now we will do this dot parser dot, sorry about that, parser dot parse reader, and we have created a document, and it will throw some exceptions, so I will add catch close. So if you go to documentation, we created this node. Now instead of parse, we used parse reader, and now we can render it. Now renderer also has one method which takes a document and render it directly to an output stream instead of rendering it to string. So for example, we can do this dot renderer dot render. Now you can see the first one renders the given node and provide one string, but that will take memory in our program. And then another is renderer, which takes an appendable and doesn't return anything because everything will be provided to the appendable. And then another is max trailing blank lines. So if there are any trailing blank lines, it will remove them. So you can use those. I will use that. So we want only one trailing blank line. So let's say somehow there are a lot of blank lines at the end of the node and you don't want to display them. So that's that. So you can provide max trailing blank lines 0 or 1. One is good choice, which is used in many places. Now we need to provide a node. So node is document. Then we need to provide one appendable. So appendable has many implementations and output stream reader is one of them. Appendable is for anything where you can append the characters. So I will say output stream writer equal to new output stream writer HTML, and you can put writer here and max length 1. That means if there is no blank line at the end of your node, there what you mean, if there are one or more, then it will just be HTML. So we created this one. Now let's go to config, and now it's very important to see if we are closing these readers and writers or not. And if I go to here, there we are using this inside try, so I will just cut them and paste them here. So now that we will close these readers, and if we close the readers, then underlying input streams and everything will also, and we are closing them in the node service as well, if I am not mistaken. We are closing the input stream here, and we are closing output stream somewhere else in the controller. The controller we have this, we are closing out, but it's good to like if you close at two places, it won't give error because try with resource handle that. Now I will restart my application and go here. Let me upload something first. I have uploaded readme, and now I will render the readme file. We obviously need to change the ID of our node and paste it. So what does it say? Okay, we did not change the project config, that's why. Instead of returning this one, I will just copy it so that it will be here for your reference. I will create a bean, and the type is markdown to HTML converter. Let's return new Flexmark. We will use the default constructor without any arguments. Restart the application and load readme, then render it. Okay. So in this case you can see it has been replaced with the headings, paragraph, ordered list items, and these things. So if you really want to see it, you can just copy this and open it in browser. So open it here, and you can see this is heading H1, and then this is the link. These are normal text in paragraph, and then this is ordered list with this correct numbering. And since project URL and these were like mentioned as it is in a plain text, so these were not rendered. But you can see this roadmap.sh is rendered. So if you click here, you will go to roadmap.sh. Okay, so I guess that is it. And if you want to add other extensions, you can obviously use this constructor, and you can provide data holder. And so there are many implementation of data holder, which is like one is mutable set, and you can specify which extensions you want to use, and also you can modify the behavior of HTML renderer using that. So that is it from my side. So one thing which we have not implemented is grammar checker, but I leave you that for as an exercise. So obviously you need to do some research, like what are the grammar checkers available for Java, and then you can use any one of them. So I have not spent time doing that, but in order to complete the project I might do that in like few days, but I'm not sure about that. So all these links will be provided in the description, and the link to this repository will also be provided in the description. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching the video, and please like and share the video, and I will meet you in the next one. Until then, bye.